and our players are now on the stage and getting ready for the upcoming match. We've got two really exciting matches for you. These players are both at X and 2, so a winner in whoever wins this game is guaranteed day 2, and the other one we just have to hope that the
Unfortunately, the player that will be losing this round will not be making it to day 2. It is a clean cut here in this current format of the regional championships. On your left, we have Mattie Morgan. On your right, Giovanni Piscitelli representing Italy, and of course Mattie representing Ireland here.
Yes, and their teams are there's a lot of similarities between their teams, although Mattie is certainly the one with a more interesting team. So I don't know if I should spoil it just now or we should go into it
I think, you know, let's leave the leave the audience guessing a little bit while we talk a little bit more about these players. Giovanni Piscitelli made it to the top 4 of the Liverpool Regional Championships, I believe, back in regulation set A in a truly amazing set of games that we got to watch. So it's really nice to see Giovanni back. I believe Giovanni also did pretty well at the European International Championships as well not too long ago. Mattie is a player that's improved just phenomenally over the last few years too, and has started getting all of those sort of high placings in events to his names. You can see them up on the screen at the moment.
Yes, the most recent accomplishment from Mattie, of course, top 16 at EUIC, the largest internationals we've had so far. So that is a fantastic achievement. And I think his EUIC team is slightly different to the team that he's running today. There are some similarities. So I will spoil one Pokemon. The Pokemon that he was using at EUIC and also using today is a Palafin. So actually one of the few Palafins that we've seen today. There weren't that many Palafins.
I think I've only seen 3 today, maybe 4 now that Mattie is going to be bringing that out. Giovanni, you can see there a few accomplishments there to his credit. DC Open in 2020, getting the top 8 at the regional level event at the World Championships that year. Bremen regional finalist as well, and I was mistaken slightly, top 8 in the Liverpool Regional Championships.
Oh, when you're competing at such a high level, I think whether you're top 16, top 8, it's pretty much all the same thing. Sometimes it's just one little small mistake in a game, or maybe the RNG in your favor that can make you lose one game. And at that level, I think all the players are quite equal.
You'd definitely be rooting for any of them. There's no real easy games when you get into the top 8 of a regional championships, and we're going to have to see how these players are composing themselves and keeping themselves focused at this late stage in the day. Remember, they have already played 8 rounds of Swiss so far, and they potentially could have played 24 games of Pokemon before even landing into this one. So it's going to be a test of their mental resilience here, whether they can just get that last win going, as we get Mattie's team on the screen for you right now.
Yes, Mattie is running a Fluttermane, Amoonguss, Arcanine, Palafin, Iron Hands and Pelipper, so no Treasure of Ruin Pokemon on his team. Really interesting, almost like a Regulation B team.
Almost, but probably a few little adaptations to be useful in the Regulation C format. A couple of things that'll be sticking out here: the Trick Room option onto the Fluttermane there, and a bit of an interesting Terra choice coming out from that Amoonguss. I've never seen Terra Electric coming out here whatsoever.
I am not sure. I'm sure Mattie has built this in mind. It is to resist something. But Electric, of course, the only attack that's super effective against Electric is Ground. So, Amoonguss might be just looking to reduce the number of attacks that it's taking super effective damage from. But now we're going to have a look at Giovanni's team, giving us a wave there to the camera. And Giovanni's team is also quite a little bit more standard, I think.
It certainly is, with that Fluttermane, Amoonguss, Chi-Yu, Gyarados, Ting-Lu and Iron Hands. We've seen this composition already on the stream today, and no stranger to what it does. It switches around well, it does quite a lot of damage, it does that, has that Gyarados there to provide a little bit of support along with that Iron Hands. Really liking the different sets that we're seeing on Ting-Lu at the moment. When we first got the Regulation C format, we really only saw Assault Vest and the choice of 4 different offensive moves depending on what was on the team. But this one has Leftovers and Protect to its name, and that really does change the way that it plays, and certainly means it's more difficult for opponents to be able to take down, given that they might only be able to attack it every other turn.
Yes. And also quite interesting is that both players have an Iron Hands on their team, and I think Iron Hands was a Pokemon that somewhat dropped off in usage at the start of Regulation C, but we've seen quite a lot of it today, and it is, I think, rising because it's dual electric and fighting type is actually really, really useful against the Treasures of Ruin, and with a lot of Gyarados running around and also Palafins earlier, its electric type attacks are going to be dealing a lot, really heavy damage against those Pokemon.
They certainly are, and at the moment, let's have a look in Twitch chat. If you're watching along live with us, show your support for these players, who you think's going to win, who you want to support, whose name you like best, whose hairstyle you like best.
Who has the best plushie?
Who has the best? Well, there's only one plushie on the desk, so maybe that's a win for Giovanni. But hey, you know, Giovanni's bought a plush and decorated the desk fantastically there, so a worthy vote in his favour.
Yes.
So yeah, do show your support and get involved with the discussion on Twitch as well.
Yes, I personally would really like to see this Pelipper come onto the field. With the Palafin is a Terra Grass type, so not a Terra Water type. But then again, maybe this is why Mattie has the Pelipper, because the Pelipper with its Drizzle ability bringing rain, the Palafin might not really need to go for a Terra Water because the rain's already boosting its sky-high attack in hero form. So you might maybe just want to Terra into a more defensive type to help against Amoonguss or any super effective electric types.
Yeah, 100% is exactly the same as 205%, or words to that effect, because yeah, certainly you want to be making sure your Palafin is doing something more useful to you, making sure you're taking advantage of that rain that the Pelipper affords. One of the things that actually was slightly surprising to me looking at the team composition was that Iron Hands isn't carrying Volt Switch. We'll have to see if that matters and if the pivoting is something that Mattie is not going to, or is going to want to have in this position, as we see Iron Hands and Palafin coming out for Mattie, Giovanni leading out with Amoonguss and that Fluttermane.
So Mattie leading with the Palafin, he's probably going to want to switch out quite soon to make use of its hero form. And the Fluttermane, a really good lead here because it's not affected by any fake outs from that Iron Hands and is able to deal super effective damage to the Iron Hands as well. Now this Iron Hands is going to be Assault Vest, so it will probably survive any fairy type attacks, even if it doesn't go for the Terra. But from the looks of it, looks like Mattie is going to choose to go for a Terra anyway.
Yeah, it's certainly in front of a Amoonguss is a really useful thing to be able to do. And of course, this Iron Hands does have access to Heavy Slam, which not all Iron Hands can boast the ability to be able to do. There's a switch out from the Palafin, as you mentioned there, Amoonguss coming in its stead. And we're going to be seeing another Iron Hands on the field in favor of the Amoonguss on Giovanni's side of things. A Terra starting off the turn, though, for that Iron Hands on Mattie's side of the field. It is that Terra Grass.
Yes, so now this Iron Hands is not going to be afraid of the Amoonguss from Giovanni's side when it comes back in later on. Fluttermane going for a Protect just to scout out what Mattie is planning to do and also trying to keep itself safe from the Heavy Slam, which does go into it. So a very good Protect from Giovanni's side here. Now this Iron Hands on Giovanni's side is very free to go for a Fake Out.
It certainly is, and we'll have to see how that affects the way that Mattie plays the game. I mean, you know, the Amoonguss does have the ability to go for a Protect. The Iron Hands can switch out and, you know, use that time to reposition. Obviously, the Fluttermane did not go down to that Heavy Slam in the last game, so there's always the opportunity for the Heavy Slam to go into Giovanni's Fluttermane this turn. If it's not that, it could be a Spore.
Yes, and a responding Terra Grass from Giovanni's Iron Hands. So two Terra Grass Iron Hands just staring each other down. This Iron Hands has gone for the Terra Poi just to try and dodge any Spores or Rage Powders that's going to be coming its way. But Fluttermane going for a substitute, just trying to dodge a Spore as well. And this Amoonguss probably is not going to be able to Spore anything this turn.
No, I really like that. The combination of Terra Grass going into the Iron Hands on Giovanni's side of the field and the substitute with the Fake Out onto Iron Hands on Mattie's side of the field just stops any damage from Iron Hands and also stops any spores coming out and ruining a board position for Giovanni. So spending the time wisely to get set up really, really well here.
It's a very safe play from Giovanni here, going for the protect on the flutter main, just scouting out again what's going to happen to that flutter main slot. And also, flutter main is behind a substitute. It's going to be very hard to knock out. Drain Punch coming out, and the Iron Hands on Mattie's side, once again going to the protect now. Looks like Giovanni's Iron Hands might be faster, or that might be a speed tie.
Yeah, that Drain Punch damage, though, onto Iron Hands on Mattie's side of the field is going to be really impactful going into this turn. It's looking to me like there is a potential that Fluttermane and Iron Hands would be able to knock out the Iron Hands on Mattie's side of the field pretty easily at the moment, unless the Amoongus decides to redirect those attacks. But if it does that, there's no spore coming out onto Giovanni's side of the field. So a really nice way to use the time to position, to further the board position that Giovanni has worked so hard to create so far.
That is true, and Mattie is taking his time, just making sure that he does not make a mistake, because the Fluttermane behind a substitute is very, very scary. Amoongus going for a Rage Powder, just trying to redirect any attacks from the Fluttermane. Fluttermane going for a Moonbuster. That was a really good Rage Powder from that Amoongus.
Yeah, going into the Amoongus and not taking too much damage for its troubles. Drain Punch, though, is going to land into the Iron Hands, not redirected, as it's now a Grass type. Heavy Slam going into the Fluttermane onto Giovanni's side of the field, easily able to break that down, and Fluttermane will now be vulnerable to any spores coming out for the next turn.
Yes, and this Iron Hands on Mattie's side is now in range of another Drain Punch from Giovanni's Iron Hands, which is not going to be affected by the Spore. The Amoongus being slower than the Iron Hands is not going to be able to help out its teammate with the Pollen Puff. And Mattie, recognizing that, is going to recall the Iron Hands for the Pelipper, so setting up for the Palafin that's going to come back in later into its hero form.
Yeah, I think the extra damage is very well needed. Looking at the Pokemon that Giovanni has on his side of the field, another Drain Punch coming into Mattie's Pelipper, breaking any Focus Sash on that Pokemon, as well as getting the substitute up. A Pollen Puff rounds out the turn, doing a little bit more damage to Iron Hands on Giovanni's side of the field.
I have to say, that Pollen Puff did not bad damage. It wasn't that much, but you know, it's a sizable amount of chip damage. The Fluttermane, of course, is now once again hiding behind a substitute, so Mattie is going to have to spend a turn trying to break it if he wants his Palafin to hit it with a really powerful Jet Punch.
Yeah, you know, in this position as well with the Pelipper in, the Fluttermane has to do something a little bit more offensive this turn. This Pelipper is putting a lot of pressure onto the Iron Hands. Now that it's Terra Grassed, Pelipper has the Hurricane, which is going to do a little bit more damage than that Pollen Puff, while the Amoongus is Rage Powdering away any damage from the Fluttermane.
Fluttermane going for a Protect that turn, just to keep it very... I think Giovanni so far has had this pattern of going for a Substitute and then Protect the following turn. So I wonder if it is something that... Ooh, a Volt Switch coming out from this Iron Hands, easily enough to knock out a Pelipper. But a critical hit, I'm not sure that matters because it was a ×4, but then Iron Hands isn't well known for having good special attacks. So who knows, maybe next game we'll be able to see whether or not that matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely down to the training of these Pokemon. Pelipper, not a very specially bulky Pokemon. Iron Hand's not a very specially offensive Pokemon. No. And certainly, usually you take the trade-off and do a little bit more damage or have a little bit more bulk in favor of having less special attack, because you don't really use the special attack on Iron Hands too much. Oh, we won't know, of course, until it happens again. Amoongus and Iron Hands, though, coming out back onto the field. Iron Hands for Mattie, and of course, Amoongus for Giovanni.
This Iron Hands on Mattie's side is really heavily chipped. I wonder if a Moonblast from it is enough to knock out the Iron Hands. Of course, there is the partner Amoongus, which can redirect away any attacks. So this Iron Hands can probably get one attack off, but the Moonblast coming out is not going to be redirected and is enough to knock out the Iron Hands. So Mattie now down to his last two Pokemon.
Certainly, and that's a big knockout onto the Iron Hands, especially with that substitute still in play. The Fluttermane on Giovanni's side of the field is not going to be affected by any spores coming out from the Amoongus on Mattie's. Amoongus on Giovanni's side of the field, there's so many Amoonguses, so many Iron Hands going on right now. I'm starting to lose a little bit of track, but Giovanni's Giovanni's pollen puff going into the Amoongus on Mattie's side of the field and doing just a little bit of chip damage. Palafin finally does join the field and is looking a little bit less threatening than I think Mattie was hoping for.
Yes, this Flutter Mane behind the substitute is really, really scary because even if Palafin can hit really, really hard with a Jet Punch, the substitute is going to be taking the damage for it. And because Mattie has already gone for the Terra Grass, this Palafin cannot go for a Terra Grass, which means that it is very vulnerable to a Spore from Giovanni's Amoongus. And Mattie, recognizing that, is going to forfeit this match to avoid revealing more information.
Expertly played there from Giovanni Piscitelli, the winner of Game 1 of Round 9, getting ever closer to playing in the second day of the Malmö Regional Championships, and it's only one game away. This is match point that we're going into, and thinking about that, Zoe, what do you think that Mattie can really adjust going into Game 2 to be able to have a chance to be able to take it to a Game 3?
I think that an early Terror turn from the Iron Hands, while it was useful in trying to dodge that Spore from the Amoongus on Giovanni's side, it ended up quite hurting him in the end game because the Palafin wasn't able to, like, the Palafin became very vulnerable to the Amoongus later on when the Iron Hands got knocked out, and it was because it was slower. I think you consistently got outsped by Giovanni's Iron Hands, so you know that's something that's Mattie needs to keep in mind. And I think one thing I did mention earlier was that Giovanni has a habit of going for substitute and protect. I wonder if Mattie will catch on to that and adjust.
An adjustment in play a little bit more than an adjustment in Pokemon going into Game 2. And I think I agree, the Flutter Mane was the real problem for Mattie. Even though it does only have access to single target attacks in that Moonblast and Shadow Ball, when it's behind a substitute, it really doesn't matter too much for Giovanni. He can just keep doing a little bit of damage, maybe picking a Shadow Ball onto that Amoongus and doing a little bit more damage,
yes.
But certainly damage nonetheless without any risk of that Flutter Mane going down. So yeah, it's certainly something that Mattie's going to be able to, or going to have to really pay attention to, maybe make a read.
Yes, and the Amoongus also didn't help for Mattie as well because it didn't have much offensive presence, so it wasn't able to, once the Flutter Mane hid behind a substitute, it wasn't able to actually break that substitute. It could only hope that its partner could break the substitute and then Spore. But then again, we kept seeing Giovanni going for Protect to dodge that double up into the Flutter Mane. So that is something I think Mattie maybe in the next game will bring something more offensive. And we are going to go into Game 2. Amoongus and Iron Hands versus the Iron Hands and Palafin.
No Flutter Mane in sight so far this game. Iron Hands and Amoongus, they're putting a lot of supportive pressure onto Mattie's side of the field. I'm not sure we've seen exactly whether or not the Iron Hands on Mattie's or Giovanni's side of the field will definitely go first, but certainly in the early game it's the Palafin likely wanting to leave the field, certainly in front of an electric and grass type, and wanting to set itself up for later.
I think we're seeing Mattie making some key decisions here, one of which is to actually leave his Palafin in, which is very, very interesting. Pelipper coming in with the safety goggles is a really safe switch in for the Amoongus, but if Giovanni calls out and goes for a Volt switch onto that, that might be quite deadly.
It certainly could be. We saw that in Game 1. We'll have to see if we see it in Game 2, but it is a different Terror choice coming out from Mattie in that Palafin. Still in its zero form, but certainly going to be wanting to do a little bit more damage. And a fake out going into the Pelipper on the switch in, and a Wave Crash in the rain is going to do more than 50% to this Iron Hands, and that is crucial to this game. Spore going into that now Grass-type Palafin will not be making any impact whatsoever.
A perfect turn from Mattie there, correctly calling a fake out onto that Pelipper slot and just switching it in, absorbing that fake out and helping its partner Palafin to deal huge damage with that Wave Crash. That Iron Hands took so much damage, and now this Amoongus can't really do much against a Terra Grass Palafin and a Pelipper, and this Iron Hands is also in range of getting another Wave Crash.
as is the Pokemon in the back that this Iron Hands would be able to switch into as well. So this Palafin is fairly free to go for another attack into the Iron Hands, as is the Pelipper. They're certainly boosted by the rain. That could be a very strong option for Mattie. Gyarados coming in for Giovanni. Going to be the perfect switch in, actually. What didn't feature in the previous game, but a clear switch up from Giovanni to do a little bit more work with Wave Crash. Going into the Gyarados, actually doing a good amount of damage, getting taken some recoil, both from the move and that Rocky Helmet, and a Hurricane follow-up. Gonna take it into the yellow and get the confusion on the Hurricane.
Oh my goodness, this Palafin has been on the field for 2 turns, and it gets knocked down to 12 HP. So the Palafin, if it chooses to go for any more Wave Crashes, is going to faint from any recoil. But you know, this Palafin's done a pretty good job of just chipping away at the opponent, and it's not very scared of this Among Us right now. But from the looks of it, Mattie is going to look to switch out that Palafin just to get it into a more powerful form later on.
I think it's definitely worth it. Certainly with the rain, you can one-hit knock out a Fluttermane in an end game with that Jet Punch potentially. It's certainly done as much as it can for now and is leaving the field in favor of that Amoonguss. Gyarados tries to go for attack. It's a little bit confused, as are we sometimes behind the desk here, but it's going to break through that, go for the Thunder Wave into that Pelipper and just lower the speed of that Pelipper there. Really, really fascinating training here. The Amoonguss actually outspeeding the Pelipper after that Thunder Wave landed into it, and is going to be able to heal it with that Pollen Puff, stopping the Gyarados from being knocked out by the Hurricane.
I think that Gyarados ended the turn with roughly equal amount of HP that it had at the start of this turn. Just its partner Amoonguss just doing such a good job of keeping it healthy. And now this Amoonguss coming in from Mattie is, of course, unable to threaten Giovanni's Amoonguss, but I think we got a glimpse of what the Amoonguss was trying to do, just healing up its teammates.
Certainly could be, as the Iron Hand switches in for the Gyarados here, and it will be the Palafin switching in for Mattie's side of the field. And yeah, going into its slightly stronger form. If that Iron Hand wasn't scared before of that baby Palafin, it certainly will be now, as Pollen Puff does heal up that Palafin. And Pollen Puff heals up the Iron Hands as well. It's healing all around.
Yes. The Iron Hands coming in, because it's just switched in, is quite free to go for a fake out. And this Palafin now is really, really healthy after coming in from that game previous turn on 12 HP, and now is suddenly really nice in the green. And the Iron Hands, of course, it can go for 1 turn of fake out and buy its teammates a bit of time. But of course, then the next turn, it is still going to be heavily threatened by that Palafin.
You've got the opportunity, though, to get a little fake out going onto your opponent's team and use that time to switch out the Amoonguss on Giovanni's side of the field into something that's a little bit more useful in this kind of position. Equally, you might just be quite happy for it to keep the Iron Hands a little bit more healthy. We'll have to see as the Terra gets committed from Giovanni's side of the field. It is going to be that Terra Grass again, just like in Game 1, onto that Iron Hands.
Jet Punch coming out from Mattie's Palafin, not doing too much to the Amoonguss, but that Drain Punch did quite a lot to the Palafin. I wonder if Mattie went for the Pollen Puff onto his own... I always call that a Pelipper. That is a Palafin. They may both have a beak, but they're very different Pokemon.
Very different indeed. Both Pokemon on Mattie and Giovanni's side of the field are going to be healing up again. So a little bit of damage done, a little bit of damage healed. Looking like the Palafin got the shorter end of that stick, actually, only healing up to about where it was before, but that Iron Hand is now on full health. I like that Jet Punch, though, coming out from Mattie's Palafin going into that Amoonguss, because you've got to remove that Amoonguss from the field, and Mattie continues to try to do that.
Drain Punch coming out once again from this Iron Hands, putting the Palafin into the orange, but Amoonguss, of course, once again healing up its teammate. This time I think the Palafin will have a little bit more HP compared to the previous turn, and of course the opposing Giovanni trying to call a switch there, but not quite working out, so the Amoonguss didn't actually get anything done this turn. But you know, there's always a next turn, and we'll see what Giovanni does.
Well, when the Iron Hands is already at full and both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field are immune to your other two attacks, you can just choose to protect or choose to try to go for a little bit of a read. If your opponent does decide to switch out, then maybe you get a little bit more of an advantage out of that turn. But a really nice situation for Mattie to be in. He's managed to just get that little bit more health. At some point, he could even start considering going for a Wave Crash. But in the meantime, it's going to be yet another Drain Punch into that Amoonguss on Giovanni's side.
So Citrus Berry is finally going to be consumed by Giovanni's Amoonguss. So now this Amoonguss' only form of recovery is to keep switching out for that regenerate. The Pollen Pup does so much damage and knocks it out immediately.
That's a one-hit knockout, critical hit. Oh my god, that Palafin is going down. A situation.
Think that mattered.
Oh, I think it probably did, but a situation where we were stalling out move after move after move. A critical hit's going to happen eventually, and that does break the cycle here. That Palafin going back to Mattie, and a key piece of the puzzle that Mattie no longer has access to.
Yes, unfortunately that Pelipper was, now that the Pelipper is paralyzed, it's not really able to, it's going to be going last, because we saw previously that the Amoonguss on Giovanni's side actually outsped it, which was something that quite surprised me. But Iron Hands, of course, still really, really powerful. So the game is not over yet. It's actually far from over. The Iron Hands is a really hard-hitting Pokemon. But, you know, it is going to struggle a bit against this Terra Grass Iron Hands and an Amoonguss. It's going to have to keep going for, you know, Drain Punch really isn't going to be hitting the Amoonguss very hard.
No, and I think Mattie's game plan was to get that Amoonguss on Giovanni's side of the field as low as possible. Giovanni, knowing that it's a key piece for his game plan going forward, will switch it out, get a little bit of health back from that regenerator ability. That Amoonguss will come in feeling a little bit fresher here. Intimidate coming out from this Gyarados onto the Iron Hands, taking a fake out, but it's that Rocky Helmet yet again that's hitting into doing a little bit of recoil damage to this Iron Hands. A Wild Charge coming out from the Iron Hands onto the Amoonguss, doing a little bit of damage, and a Pollenpuff doing a little bit of damage. So little bits of damage all round.
I think that Iron Hands dealt more damage to itself because of that Rocky Helmet. That Rocky Helmet Gyarados actually proving to be really, really valuable, you know, switching in on a Wave Crash earlier, getting that Intimidate on the Palafin, and then just tanking that Wave Crash so well, and then forcing the Palafin to take both Wave Crash and Rocky Helmet Recoil. Now the Amoonguss is going to be taunted by that Gyarados, but that's not really going to stop the Pollen Puff.
No, not at all. Volt Switch coming out from Giovanni's Iron Hands. It's going to be pivoting out, and it's going to be the last Pokemon that we're going to find out what that is, or it could be just the Amoonguss coming back in for Giovanni. Maybe, could you guess? Zoe, I think it's probably going to be another Pollen Puff in our future here. Wild Charge going into that Gyarados is easily going to be able to pick up the knockout onto Gyarados on Giovanni's side of the field. A little bit of recoil for Mattie's Iron Hand as well as that Rocky Helmet. But hey,
look at that,
guess
a Pollen Puff.
Pollen Puff coming out. It's going strong. That Iron Hands is still nice and healthy, and there's no longer any Intimidate on Giovanni's side of the field. But Fluttermane returning with that all-important substitute. And
now that the Terra option is gone from Maddie's side, this Iron Hands will be taking super effective damage from that Floodmane if the Floodmane decides to attack. I wonder if Giovanni is going to call some sort of defensive move from Maddie, such as a switch out, and go for the substitute again.
Certainly could, and now that the Terra is used on Mattie's side of the field as well, there's no Terra Grass Iron Hands, so that Amoonguss on Giovanni's side of the field is going to be able to Rage Powder any damage away from the Fluttermane. So a really easy turn for Giovanni to get a substitute set up before just going for damaging moves. Mattie knows that and decides instead to switch in the Pelipper for that Iron Hands.
I wonder if the Pelipper's Hurricane will be enough to knock out this Amoonguss. I am not entirely sure. Pelipper's got reasonable special attack. It's not got the best, but Amoonguss going for a Rage Powder just to protect its teammates from taking any damage. And the Fluttermane, of course, going for a substitute just to dodge any potential spores coming.
And another Pollen Puff is going to be healing up this Pelipper. Only a few hit points, but those few hit points could make all the difference in front of an offensive threat like the Fluttermane on Giovanni's side of the field. And you're right, Zoe, it will be down to a case of whether or not this Pelipper both is able to knock out this Amoonguss with a Hurricane, but more importantly, whether it's going to be able to attack whatsoever.
Yes, there's both the Fluttermane dealing heavy damage, being able to hit the Petalpa. Of course, it could get Rage Powdered by the Among Us from Maddie's side, but I think, oh no, the Fluttermane, does it have Dazzling Gleam or Moonblast?
It has Moonblast and Shadow Ball.
Blast. Okay, so if the Among Us chooses to go for the Rage Powder, it will be... Oh, it can't actually Rage Powder. I completely forgot it got taunted. So actually, Fluttermane really free to just hit this Pelipper with a Shadow Ball. I think it... Oh, it doesn't actually go into the Pelipper. It goes to the Among Us, dealing a sizable amount of damage back into it. And now the Citrus Berry is going to proc and allow the Among Us to go back into the green.
Going back into the green is what this Among Us definitely wants to do. It's going to have to take another attack in that Pollen Puff coming out from Among Us on Giovanni's side of the field, and an ineffective Pollen Puff coming out from Mattie's side of the field. Finishing the turn off, we have an Among Us just surviving a confusion as well. This turn is absolutely electric here, coming into these late stages of Game 2 in this Round 9 match. And wow, we weren't sure whether that Among Us was going to go down or not. I think Giovanni's probably pretty pleased that it didn't.
A very well-trained Among Us over there, just surviving on a sliver of health, and with the Regenerator, it can just easily switch out and get some health back. And we do see Maddie's Among Us switch out first, and I think because Giovanni's Among Us has I don't know if it's consistent. I believe it's always been outspeeding. So yes, it looks like Giovanni is not going to recall the Among Us.
No, certainly not, and it is going to be a Protect coming out from the Fluttermane on Giovanni's side of the field, following the pattern that we've been setting up, getting a substitute and then protecting not long after. A correct call there, Spore going into the Iron Hands on this switch in. So what a read coming out from Giovanni as Hurricane launches into the Protect. Again, Mattie making a little bit of a read there, trying to get as much value out of the turn as possible, but Giovanni just one step ahead.
That was a fantastic read from Giovanni, going for the Spawn to the Among Us slot, which then became the Iron Hands. I think from Giovanni's side, it may be quite obvious that there was going to be a switch out because the Among Us really wasn't doing anything. The Pelipper was at full health, so there's no point in Pollen Puffing. And now this Floodmate is looking really, really nice. The Pelipper not being able to move because it's paralyzed. I think he was going for a Protect in that case.
Potentially there, fully paralyzed, not being able to move whatsoever, and a Moonblast going to be following up into the Iron Hands. Not enough to pick up the KO, but certainly getting close as Iron Hands on Maddie's side of the field continues to take a nap.
And now this Iron Hands from Giovanni coming in is able to hit this Pelipper that's paralyzed, meaning the Pelipper is going to have to take a hit before it can launch anything else back. So this Iron Hands doesn't really have a need to go for any fake outs right now because it's just a really, really safe Moonblast into Iron Hands and a Volt Switch or Wild Charge into the Pelipper slot.
I would really be not surprised at all to see a Wild Charge coming out. We saw the training of those Among Uses and the Pelipper was going after them. That means that the paralysis made this Pelipper a little bit slower, and the Iron Hands have been going before the Among Uses because the Among Uses have been able to Pollen Puff all of the recoil damage away. Yeah, ipso facto, that Iron Hand is faster than the Pelipper.
Now we're going to see an Among Us switch in for that Iron Hands. Fluttermane going for a Moonblast onto Among Us does quite a sizable amount of chip damage, and because this Among Us on Mattie's side has already eaten its Citrus Berry, it's going to... But Pelipper going to go down from that Wild Charge. No surprises there. That was a ×4 super effective electric type attack from a very strong Iron Hands, and now Mattie is down to his last two Pokemon.
Last two Pokemon, one of which is taking a nap. So unfortunately not going to be as active as maybe Mattie would like. And of course that Fluttermane on Giovanni's side of the field is sitting pretty behind a substitute, so we'll be able to just easily launch a Moonblast or a Shadow Ball into whatever slot he deems necessary and follow up with an attack from the Iron Hands. In this position, I'm expecting to see a Shadow Ball coming out from the Fluttermane into the Among Us. That would do the most damage, as this Iron Hands is going to be able to freely attack into Iron Hands on Mattie's side of the field.
Mattie's Iron Hands has not... Oh, I think it's taken one turn of sleep, so it will be... it is going to get knocked out from that Moonblast. It was a very easy knockout, of course. Oh, with a critical hit to just rub some salt into the wound.
The pattern of the Malmö Regional Championships where critical hits only land on Pokemon that are on very small amounts of HP.
Yes, now this Amoonguss is the last Pokemon left standing on Mattie's side, and Mattie, recognizing that an Amoonguss has a 0 offensive presence, is not going to be able to knock out that substitute, is going to forfeit.
Certainly is, and it will be Giovanni Piscitelli making it through to day 2 of the Malmö Regional Championships. Congratulations to Giovanni. Commiserations, of course, to Mattie. A well-played set on both ends, and a real showcase from Giovanni on how to create a great board position and then never, ever lose it.
Absolutely. I remember, I think in game 1, there was some points during kind of the end game where there was just a lot of pollen puffing going around. It was quite slow paced, but you could see that with each passing turn, the Pokemon on Mattie's side were just slowly losing a bit more health than they were regaining back. And Giovanni just playing really, really safely, making sure that, you know, it doesn't matter if the opponent's recovering health, as long as I'm doing more damage each turn, that's fine. And then Palafin going down to a critical hit pollen puff. That was a little unfortunate, but, you know, Mattie then losing that really strong Pokemon on his team really put him on back foot.
Yeah, I think like a little bit more damage to that Amoonguss on Giovanni's side of the field, and it might have been a bit of a different game coming into the end game, but you know, that's not what was to be in this particular match. One thing I really want to call out from Giovanni is the masterful use of Substitute and Protect. Substitutes regarded by many players as one of the best moves in VGC, but it's also one of the most difficult to use effectively. The thing that I really liked about how Giovanni was playing that was using the Substitute to create a threat. Something that you want to target and then saying, I'm going to protect and let my partner do a little bit of work as well. Just keep chipping away, as you said, about onto Mattie's team, making sure that that damage just kept on coming.
That second game was really, really interesting to watch because, you know, it was quite, each turn was very slow paced, you know, Pokemon getting slowly chipped, but yeah, that Fluttermane coming in at the end game, and I think also the Gyarados was a really interesting adjustment from Giovanni because it wasn't there in the first game, and I think Giovanni might have recognized that he got a little bit lucky with that critical hit Pollen Puff onto the Palafin, and it was a little too close for his liking, so maybe in the game 2 he thought, oh, you know what, I want Gyarados in at least with the Intimidate that can bring down the attack of that Palafin.
Well, I think with the substitute that the Fluttermane was using so expertly in game 1, we actually only saw 3 Pokemon that Giovanni used, so it may have been that that Gyarados was in the back, but the way that that game started with Mattie using the Terra Grass Iron Hands and the Amoonguss, it wasn't really ever a good time for that to be switching in, so maybe we would have seen it if the game 1 had lasted a little bit longer, but we didn't quite get there, unfortunately. But yeah, just again, another showcase of how to create a good position and keep it for quite a few turns.
Good pickup, because I actually totally forgot that Giovanni did not show his last Pokemon in game 1. I don't know why, but in my mind, he showed all 4 his Pokemon. So yes, that's a very good point. The Gyarados could have been hiding in the back, just making sure that if the Palafin was in its hero form, the Gyarados was ready to come in and help out its teammates.
And I think that's you know, really a way that this Giovanni had built the team so well to take advantage of all of the tools at his disposal, using that Gyarados just when you need it, switching it in to you know, take a few attacks, slow playing the game as well. I mean, you know, we had so many turns where there was an Amoonguss and something Terra Grass next to it on the field, and both players were just sort of just like, I'm going to do a little bit of damage, I'm going to do a little bit of damage, I'm going to do a little bit of damage, but the Amoongusses were keeping all of the health going back up, and yeah, it wasn't until that critical hit Pollen Puff that it was able to finish off. But even if that critical hit didn't happen, I thought it was a really clever adaptation from Giovanni, because the Terra Grass Pokemon on Mattie's side of the field were going to be taking super effective damage from it, so you might as well use Amoonguss in an offensive position in that scenario. It's
really funny, actually. Amoonguss is really well known for sporing, but I'm pretty sure both those Amoongusses used Pollen Puff way more than Spore. I'm pretty sure, I think Mattie's Amoonguss just never really used Spore in that game too. It was just Poland buffing all the time because it kept facing an opposing Amoonguss and some Terra Grass Pokemon. Terra was Iron Hands.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
memory
yeah,
is
yeah.
a little short. I just remember the Terra Grass. The Amoonguss really couldn't Spore anything because of that.
Certainly not, and then the Gyarados in Game 2 was able to get the taunt off and showing why it's a more popular supportive option. And we've seen the decline of Palafin usage in Regulation C, and I think this is exactly why, because these Gyaradoses have a little bit of a better matchup into some of the more offensive teams, Great Tusks and the Sun compositions that we've seen so much. Well, in the case where Gyarados comes in, it's not really trying to do lots of waterfall damage, it's trying to taunt Amoongusses, it's trying to Thunder Wave Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field for a little bit of speed control. And then, you know, at the end game, maybe it's trying to knock out a Pokemon that's gone down to its Focus Sash.
It's really interesting that I think the journey of Palafin throughout this Regulation C is actually quite similar to the journey of the Torkoal in Regulation A, where at the start of the format, it was just going for the Terra, Fire, Charcoal, or Choice Specs eruption, and it was KOing everything. And then players slowly learned to train their Pokemon to survive that. And I think at the start of this format, and also towards the tail end of Regulation B, there was all these Palafins with Mystic Water, Terra Water, and it was just taking KOs left and right. And now players are slowly starting to learn to adapt and train their Pokemon to survive that. So in a way, I think Palafin is that path has been like Torkoal.
It went from 0 to hero. Not quite back to 0 just yet. We saw it do some quite good work. Yeah, maybe regular, somewhere in between. It's certainly still a great Pokemon, and I think you know, we saw in the European International Championships as well as you know, the use of Palafin doing something else. Jet Punch, Wave Crash, staples on Palafin.
And Taunt, I remember seeing.
Taunt, yeah, exactly that. We saw Substitute from Gabriel Agacci coming out as well, rather than the Haze that was more common, to use Palafin as a little bit more of a Dondozo counter. We'll have to see more about that and whether Giovanni has any thoughts about using Gyarados versus Palafin in this kind of archetype. We're setting up for a little bit of an interview, so won't be too much longer. We'll get to hear from Giovanni Piscitelli and how he feels about getting into Day 2 of the Malmö Regional Championships.
I'm sure if I were in his shoes, I would be absolutely thrilled going X&2, and you know, that last win in, especially on round 9. It's been such a long day, been playing for 8 rounds, and you know, it is really a test of your mental endurance at this point. And Giovanni, you know, keeping his cool, making sure that his focus is always on point, just positioning all of his Pokemon into the right place to make sure that they can take the necessary KOs. And we are going to cut into the interview where we're going to hear from Giovanni himself.
Hello, yes, we are here with the winner of the final round of the Malmö Regional Championships, Giovanni Piscitelli. How are you doing?
Hi, David. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking me.
No problem. And after that match, which seemed quite slow-paced to start with, it seemed though you kind of really had a really nice game plan. You just executed it really well.
Yeah, that were both of slow games because we had some similar mons, Amoonguss and Ironhands specifically, and our teams are based on repositioning. And we had to play against the Terra Grass of the other mons because Amoonguss was too strong for both teams, and I have substitute Fluttermane, so I just had to have the position to make a fake out on Rage Powder and substitute against the other Iron Hands. And so it was all repositioning with my Intimidate of Gyarados, Pollen Puff Amoonguss, fake out Iron Hands. I thought my Iron Hands was faster because I noticed in game 1. So in game 2 I had a plan of for the same lead that Mattie did in game 1 of fake out on Iron Hands and Spore on the Palafin. But I forgot it was Terra Grass also the Palafin. But in the end it wasn't a big problem because Terra Grass Palafin is more manageable instead of Iron Hands, Terra Grass Iron Hands.
Yeah, it seemed like a really good position. You just kept that Iron Hands really healthy. Fluttermane supported really nicely too, and it was kind of really cool to see like a masterclass of positioning from you, just to see how you could just add like identify your win con and just really stick to it there. So in terms of the team itself, how much have you been practicing with it leading up to this event?
I've been practicing this kind of composition since the starting of Regulation C. Of course, I brought 5 of 6 of these Pokemon also at the AYC. I had Baxcalibur instead of Tinglu in the AYC and a lot of different sets. So I just adjusted that team and make it for more optimal for this tournament. With the substitute Fluttermane, with the Terra Grass of Iron Hands because Amoonguss is annoying, and I had Terra Fire on my AV Iron Hands in AYC. That is good against Chiyu Fluttermane, but against Amoonguss is a pain. So I just prefer to have the Spore immunity and the Rage Powder immunity with such a bulky Pokemon as Iron Hands. I thought that was better, and also I changed the item on Gyarados.
Okay.
Because I was lefties with Protect, and now I have Helping Hand that I clicked only once in this tournament, and a Rocky Helmet that was so useful in a lot of rounds of this tour.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a really interesting team that we've seen a lot of in as we've kind of come on for the rest of the day, where a lot of people are starting to use the 6 that you've used too. But those kind of interesting adaptations that you've made, like the Helping Hand and the Rocky Helmet, are you seem like you've really made it your own, which seems to have made you paid off.
Yeah. It isn't all my own because I built the team with Luca Ceribelli and Francesco Piopero also, and other guys. And unfortunately, in the last round before this one, I had to fight against Francesco. So we had a full mirror match that was painful to play.
Oh no!
I won. We brought the same Pokemons. It was similar of this match because it's Iron Hand Amoonguss against Fluttermane.
Okay,
that's it.
That's it. Yeah, but you've taken the turn this time to kind of go into day 2 and do justice for the both of you, I'm sure. Yeah. So how much championship points do you want at the moment now?
Right now I have 415. I am 15 in Europe in the Europe CP standings, so I'm fighting for the Day 2 invite.
Yeah.
Because with all the tournament that I played this season, I won't go at Worlds without it. Because if I just wanted my invitation, I had to go. Since I make top 8 in Liverpool, and I had already 60 points from the London Open. I just had to go to London, make some points, and locals because they are back, the Global Challenge and Turin Special Event that is in Italy where I'm from. So I didn't have to make all this tournament. So right now the reasonable thing is to try to do the 2, and if I don't get it, I won't go. If I get it, I get it.
Okay.
With the day 2 of in this tournament, I'm confident, but I hope to do more well tomorrow.
Okay, brilliant. So if you do end up going to Turin as you're kind of planning to go to, it sounds like an easy event for you to get to as well. Do you think you'll run a similar thing that you did today, or do you think you might change things up?
Where in the AYC, am I running the AYC?
When you go to Torino
okay.
in 2 weeks' time, do you think you'll use the same team?
Yeah, I think I don't know because I don't want to reveal my cards.
But true, yeah. Okay.
Maybe yes, because I'm confident with this kind of team composition, some bulky Pokemon with 2 faster attacker that could set up something. Amoonguss is the key Pokemon. I played every tournament with Amoonguss, I think. And so Amoonguss will be in the team. Probably yes.
Okay, all right.
The other I don't know. Probably I would also the others.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of counter-teaming Giovanni, then bring something for Amoonguss. Yeah, if you haven't already.
Yeah,
Terra Grass and everything. Yeah, okay, so what's your kind of future plans then, kind of beyond Worlds then, after that? Are you kind of in the stipend or travel award race for the next international at the moment?
I don't know many points I have for that kind of paid trip stipend because I didn't do well in the global challenges. I only made 35 points that are too low. But with this tournament in Turin and the locals, maybe yes, but I don't know if I will go, because this is my last year of university, my last year of the actual job that I have, and in the future I want another better job, and I don't know how much time I will have, and I think and I hope that locals will return for all the season. So with the BFL of 6 MSS and 6 PC for every stipend period, I don't think I can get the pay trip for something. But if I get the pay trip for the first international championship, I'll try to go there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that'll be an amazing opportunity. I'm sure you've done the same sort of thing, especially with how much championship points you've gotten over the last few years as well. So just before we sign off, have you got any shout-outs you want to give to Giovanni?
Shout-out are always the same. I shout out my family, my friend Leonardo, that without him I couldn't be here, because I had to fly here from Bologna, but in Italy, in the region where Bologna is, there are floodings. So to make sure to get there, I take a more expensive flight from the city near where I live. And in the evening, when I were getting home, a wheel of my car broke, so I had to. I haven't a way to get into the airport, and my friend Leonardo bring me there at 4 a.m. So I thanks him, and I obviously want to thank all the Italian players, all the Italian community, and especially Il Server.
Okay, yeah. Even if Leonardo wasn't a friend before, he'd be a friend after that, picking up at 4 a.m. So thank you so much for bringing Giovanni here so we can have him on this couch right now. Giovanni, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your win, and you're into day 2 as well.
Yeah, I'm in day 2.
Brilliant, okay.
Let's hope for tomorrow.
That's exactly. So we're going to hand it back over to potentially a little bit of a short break before we close up on the show here. So thank you for now, and we'll be right back.